I'm expecting that my kid is going to receive an autism diagnosis. That's something that we heard recently in a consultation from a mom of a little boy that's almost 3, and it's something that we unfortunately hear not infrequently at Thrive. This kid was struggling with some motor delays, wasn't communicating well, had some repetitive motions, as well as a list of chronic GI and gut and immune struggles to go with it. He was struggling in many, many ways, and as much as this mom, you could tell, was committed to finding answers and was really looking down all different paths, therapies, gut, GI system, at the same time, you can tell she was scared, right? You don't know what the future holds, and you're worried what that label or that diagnosis is going to mean for your kid. A lot of parents, especially if it's your first kid, you might not even be thinking of some of these things as red flags until they're 9 months, they're 18 months, they're almost 2-3 years old before you realize, like, oh wait, this kid is a little bit different than everyone else I'm playing with. And my mommy and me classes in 9-month-old range are looking a little bit different developmentally. You might not know what to look for. And that's what I want to do in this video, is I want to give you some early warning signs, some early indicators that that kid might be struggling developmentally, struggling neurologically, in a path that would lead towards that future autism diagnosis. Because the earlier you're aware of those things, the earlier you can intervene and do something about them to get them on a different path. So that's what this is about. Giving you some of those warning signs, but also giving you some natural drug-free ways that you can help create a different future trajectory and future path for that kid. And listen, no two kids are alike, right? Every kid's autism diagnosis, every kid's journey of sickness and struggling looks dramatically different. And yeah, there might be a role that genetics play, but it's not the role that you've been told, right? It's not what you've been told by other providers or pediatricians or Dr. Google, that that's the only factor involved. There's more and more evidence mounting that shows that environmental factors like maternal infections, different maternal stresses, prematurity, birth intervention or birth trauma that might lead to a decrease in oxygen to the brain, and specifically the brain stem in certain parts of birth. All of these different variables are indicators that that kid is struggling and going to be on that neurodevelopmental path. So when we add up all of those different factors, when we add up all those different variables to what we would call the perfect storm of different challenges, we can start to piece together and see how really it's this system of central nervous system stuckness. There's a nice scientific word for you. That central nervous system getting stuck in a more primitive brain state, so that as that kid is aging chronologically, the brain and their development is stuck in those deeper layers. They're stuck in basically a state of what we would call the gas pedal, the stress or the sympathetic nervous system. So what all those warning signs then show up and look like? Well, let me give you a couple different examples of what those autism indicators look like at different ages. So we're talking super early, maybe 3 months old. What we would want to expect for kids is starting to have eye contact. They're going to be grabbing onto things, right? If you reach in and give them their finger, they're going to be able to hold on to it. They might even be not reaching and grabbing for toys, but if there's something in their lap or there's something in their range, they may be able to hold on to that, and then to bringing stuff to their mouth, whether it's their hands or there's different things that you can hold on to. I personally can relate to this because we've got a wonderful, healthy, happy, thriving little 3-month-old at my house, and she is doing all of those things in so many fun ways. And it's cool seeing babies develop and seeing the wheels turn and the wheels spin so quickly, right? Their brains are doing so much, they're developing so quickly, and they're connecting dots. So that's what we want to see right away. But let's say a little bit later, 6-7 months around the corner there, a little bit down the road, we want to see that they're turning towards sounds, right? If you communicate, if you speak, if there's a startle sound, you want to see that the kid might look in that direction. Or another thing at that point is that they're not engaging, laughing, responding in that way, right? You should have those baby chuckles and those belly cackles that parents love, and you probably got lots of videos of on your phone, hopefully. Those are things we want to be seeing around that 7-month time frame. 9 months, they should be responding to their name, right? You should be able to yell out their name, call out for the kid, and yeah, they're not having a conversation, they're not coming and beckoning over. I can't get my 3-year-old to do that sometimes, but they're aware of it, they're responding to it, they're mimicking and they're copying you, right? Maybe they're starting to wave, make little gestures like that. They're looking, if you point in a certain direction, if you're, look, hey, look over here, if you're pointing, they're able to connect the dots of not just looking at your finger, but looking in that direction of where you're pointing. And then as that goes on, as we get to 12 months and then into that 1 to 2 year time frame, what we're gonna see is those similar concepts of symptoms magnified. It's going to look more intense and more severe of they're not communicating or making any sort of language or speaking sounds, right? By 2, we should be doing that for sure. So not really putting words together. They're not really communicating. The standing and motor control at that point is often an issue. Not every kid, right? There's tons of kids that end up on that autism spectrum that have had a more or less typical motor control spectrum, but it's pretty common that there's some gaps and some developmental issues on that path as well. Maybe they're toe walking, maybe they're not able to hit those crawling and walking milestones as early as they should. It's getting delayed and pushed back. And as a side note on that, crawling doesn't mean just moving on the ground in like an army crawl or a butt scoot. Crawling should be a cross crawl pattern, which means you're on your hands and your knees, and if the right hand goes up, the left knee goes up, and if the left hand goes up, the right knee comes up, and it's this alternating pattern. Anything besides that is suboptimal neurological development and is going to show up as different stuff down the road. So all of those are things that we would take and notice as early warning signs, not that 100% this kid is on the path to an autism diagnosis, but that there are some developmental struggles and that they're definitely not reaching their full potential and not at their best. So what I want you to do with that information is think, okay, let's be earlier to it, right? Unfortunately, the general approach to most pediatrician offices or the way that those providers are trained is a wait and see, or they'll grow out of it, right? Especially in those early phases with some of the motor things. We hear that all the time with head rotation and movement issues like torticollis and plagiocephaly. If your head is only looking in one direction, it's probably going to lead to a flattening on one side. And instead of addressing that as soon as we notice it, which might even be noticing a breastfeeding preference on one breast over the other, instead of addressing it at that point and trying to resolve it, we wait until it qualifies as a bad enough situation to fit for a helmet or to get PT. But at that point, honestly, it's too late. It's like waiting for the most severe outcome instead of addressing it when it's earlier on. So that's so many other examples of that, right? Colic, let's not just hope they grow out of it. Let's try to address and calm that system, and on and on and on. So early intervention is key. And there is a movement towards more of a proactive approach there, right? Early intervention therapists is a big part of that. We love encouraging parents to pursue those therapies. There is so much benefit out of OT and PT and feeding and sensory things early on. What we find though is that the combination of that with addressing the nervous system is by far the most powerful one. And honestly, there needs to be the right sequence there. And that's where neurologically focused pediatric chiropractic fits into this conversation, right? Maybe you're wondering, well, what the heck does any of this have to do with chiropractic? That is our wheelhouse. That is the part that we're obsessed with. The only reason we care about the spine and the back is that's what houses your central nervous system, right? Your brain into your brainstem extends out into the spinal cord, and that's what we want to make sure is optimized and is functioning as it's designed to. So let me be overly clear. As pediatric PX docs trained chiropractors, we are not trying to treat autism. And this is not some cure for autism, because that's not the goal of an adjustment, right? I don't have an autism treatment adjustment at all. Our goal of care, our focus, and our approach is help balance the autonomic nervous system, calm that dysautonomia, or that nervous system that's stuck in a state of stress and fight or flight and sympathetic tone, because that's what allows that brain development to start catching up, right? We talked earlier that chronological age moving faster than the developmental age. We need to start closing that gap, and that's the goal of care, is to start moving through those primitive early brain states and getting that higher level cognitive function turned back on. When a kid is stuck in survival mode, they're stuck in stress because that upper cervical birth trauma or whatever other factors were involved. When they're stuck there, when that vagus nerve can't function as it's supposed to, you got no chance, regardless of what other therapies you're doing, regardless of what other supplements and diet changes and anything else that you've been working on. You're going to be stuck and getting not the impact and the changes that you need to see, because the operating system, the central nervous system, is what runs everything else. So that is really our obsession and our starting point, is optimize that, clear up that, so that everything else can do what it's designed to do. And so all that hard work that you're putting in is way more effective. Earlier the better. That's the summary that I want you to take away. Look for these warning signs, even the early ones of before a kid's born or what that birth process is like. Take action at that point. Don't wait until it gets bad enough to qualify for a bigger label or a diagnosis, because it's so much harder to undo at that point. So there's your action steps, guys. We have more information at the link in our bio. This week that we're posting the video, there's a link in there that has some more warning signs of autism, some of the more research and resources that you can find there. If you've got other specific questions about what care looks like, you want to get your kids scanned, you want to do those neurological tests to measure where is their operating system at, please give our team a call, send us a message here. That's what we're here for. We want to help your kid reach their full potential, want to make sure that there's nothing getting in the way of them being the best version of themselves.